Hi, thank you for joining me today. My name is Nima Baiati. I'm the Executive Director and General Manager of Lenovo Cybersecurity Solutions Group. And today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and how we approach these challenges and opportunities as small and medium organizations. Many times when we think about cybersecurity, we think about it from the context that it's a big organization problem, or even that large organizations face a different set of challenges than smaller organizations face. As we go through our discussion today, we'll uncover some of these myths and really understand not only where technology plays and the acceleration and adoption of technology plays into this mix, but also some of the best practices that small businesses can use to be able to enhance their security posture and ultimately be able to drive greater efficiency, greater operational capability for the success of their organizations. Now, as we get into this, it's important that we talk about AI. It's been an incredibly popular topic for the last 2 years. And when we saw technologies like ChatGPT enter into the mainstream, something significant happened. AI became democratized. Now, it's important to put this in some context and really look at what we're talking about when we say AI, because it's become a very, very popular term. AI isn't something new. In fact, the concept of AI has been around since the 50s, even earlier on some of the earliest research papers. So it's a technology and a concept from a computer science standpoint that we've been working through for the last 50, 60, 70 years. As we went through the last several decades, a few things happened. Namely, we saw computing power start to increase exponentially. And as that computing power increased, not only from an operational standpoint, were we as organizations able to do things that we couldn't have imagined before, things like cloud computing, software as a service, distributed workforces. But the types of technologies that we use on top of those platforms started to accelerate as well. And so as these platforms have accelerated, the capabilities that we have in our organizations have accelerated. And the nature of work has changed. Perhaps no event in recent history underscores this as much as the COVID pandemic, where we saw an overnight shift from a large percentage of workers working within the four walls of the corporation or within the four walls of a small business to working remotely, working in a hybrid manner, working in a distributed manner. And as this happened, the security concept or the security framework in which that we look at an organization and what we're trying to protect, and we are ultimately trying to protect that organization and enable that organization to be able to achieve its mission objectives, that framework completely changed. Today, every device really is a network. And by extension, then, we have our most critical assets, our data, sitting outside the four walls of the office. Now, where does AI play into this? AI and generative AI in particular are amazing technologies, and they have some really, really powerful use cases. Use cases that we see today in the areas of, for example, healthcare. We have customers that are using artificial intelligence today that are enabling them to, for example, better detect cancer inside of patients because they're able to bring together disparate data sets and run models against them. Many organizations today are using AI to drive greater efficiency, to automate labor-intensive tasks, and to open an entirely broad new skill set area for tomorrow's workforce. Now, the flip side to that, just like every good technology, unfortunately, is that the bad guys, the attackers, the adversary also changes and evolves. And we saw this evolution start to happen a decade ago. It used to be that the hacker, right? And we all have this concept of a hacker of, somebody sitting in their mother's basement, covered with Cheeto dust, wearing a hoodie, going out and trying to do nefarious things. that whole concept changed. 20 or 25 years ago, if you wanted to be a hacker, you had to have some pretty deep computer science skills. You had to understand how code worked. You had to understand how systems operated. Today, that technological bar is much lower. And one of the things that AI has done is made it easier for adversaries to do things like social engineering. And we'll talk about social engineering here in just a few moments. To do things like find the holes in an organization's environment. Be able to understand better what type of security capabilities an organization has. A perfect example of this is if you're an attacker and you want to understand what kind of tools and skills an organization has inside of it that it's running, all one needs to do is go out to a platform, for example, like LinkedIn, and look at the job postings in terms of the skills that they're hiring against. AI has made this more automated for the adversary. And the nature of the adversary has also changed. The adversary has changed from the standpoint in that it went from that security expert, that computer science expert, that tinker, to really a criminal entity, criminal organizations. And these attack groups are criminal organizations. They operate much like an organization. And so the size and scope of their targets does not really matter to them. What they're looking at is volume. The more bullets, for example, that they can shoot at adversaries, the higher hit rate that they have. So as an attacker, I can decide, for example, I'm going to go after one specific target. And that happens a lot of times. But what a lot of these organizations also do is go after a myriad of targets, hundreds of targets at a time, thousands of targets at a time to see what sticks. And in many cases, it's small and medium businesses that get pulled into this target net. And this is why we see, for example, this confluence of AI and cybersecurity starting to take place, where by 2025, it's estimated that annual damages from cyber attacks are going to be in excess of $11 trillion globally. It's a significant number, and it's a significant number that has ramifications to every single one of us in terms of how we do business, where we do business, but also at the macro level to the global economy. And we see within the SMB segment, cybercrime is on the rise. 61% of SMBs were victims of a cyber attack in 23. 83% of SMBs, as a result, are planning on investing more in cybersecurity. And the average budget increase there is 19%. And of course, we're seeing this shift towards managed services. Managed services enables organizations that are smaller to be able to outsource a lot of the capabilities that they need because, let's face it, there's a massive skill shortage in cybersecurity. There are over 3 million unfilled security jobs today, and cybersecurity professionals are extremely expensive. So when you put all these pieces together, it becomes a challenging environment, especially for organizations that are extremely resource constrained. An organization that may not be able to bring to bear the same types of resources as a large bank on Wall Street or a large auto manufacturer, for example. But when we look at the challenges and kind of the threat vector landscape itself, the human has always been and still continues to be, unfortunately, the weakest link. As human beings, we're generally quite trusting, and the digital landscape presents us with a number of opportunities to inadvertently make a mistake. How many of us have received a text message, for example, saying that FedEx or UPS or the US Postal Service is trying to deliver a package for us, and all we need to do is click this link to update something? Or received an email from some Nigerian prince promising us riches? Well, before, people were clicking on these links a lot. And phishing attacks, the human factor, was the number one vector. Today, with capabilities like generative AI, the attackers have at their hands the ability to craft really, really well-written emails, right? 5 years ago, 4 years ago, you'd get an email and saying, hey, this is your bank. We need to update some information. Click this link or give us a call back. It wasn't always easy to tell, but we still had a chance to tell because there might have been a grammatical error in that email. a misplaced period, something was just off. How many of us today have used capabilities like a GPT tool to help us craft that professional sounding email? The attackers are doing the same thing. And so it's becoming much harder to detect what's real and what's fake. And as a result, we see 96% of all security breaches take place to some level of human error. Someone inadvertently, by mistake, clicked on something they shouldn't have clicked on, sent somebody a file or access to a document that they shouldn't have sent access to. 41% of all targeted attacks happen through emails targeted at employees. 24% of breaches occur because, frankly, of either negligence, unawareness. We're all busy, especially in smaller organizations. We may do something that we truly believe is in the interest of the business or we're doing the right thing, but ends up, in many cases, crippling the business. And so we see even for large organizations, a cyber attack can be debilitating. But for a small organization, an attack can be devastating. And so when we then look at the readiness factors of a small organization versus organizations in the mid-market, in the mid-market, over half of the organizations surveyed have experienced a cyber incident. And their average loss to a security incident, $29 million. For a small business, almost half have experienced some kind of a security incident. Now imagine a loss from an incident costing your organization over $1 million. Then you look at the types of training that's in place, right? We talked about how critically important the human being is in this equation and how important it is to have the right training and processes in place. 81% of small organizations don't have any formalized training. And training doesn't need to be mind-numbing, right? None of us want to sit through 3 days worth of training, or never mind 3 hours worth of training, going through a bunch of legalese and compliance documents. Training should be something that's in short snippets, delivered on an ongoing basis, easily consumable, easily understandable, and something that can be easily repeated, right? Because we all know from everything that we do, all of our learning that we do, whether it's from a security learning or even if we're trying to pick up a new skill in the gym, we've got to repeat it. It's that repetition aspect of it. So as you're looking inside of your organizations to roll out these types of training programs, which are critically important, make sure that they're concise, digestible bites that can be repeated on a very consistent basis to your employees, so it stays top of mind, so that people get that muscle memory. So when they see that email requesting an invoice being paid, and here's the account details, or here's the Bitcoin wallet that they should be paid into, immediately a light goes off. That, let me get some validation on this, right? Or I'm in HR, why am I getting an invoice, right? It should go into finance. When we look at risk frameworks, nearly half of organizations and small businesses and mid-markets don't have a risk framework, which is really unfortunate, because how are you even going to know how to address the challenges that your organization has without having a framework in which to look at those challenges? Putting in place a risk framework beyond a security standpoint is an educating experience for the business and your organization's leadership team, because it helps you understand not just what your risk tolerance is, meaning what kind of risk you're always going to have to be exposed to, because no organization is 100% secure. You can't be, right? It'd be like living in a house and having bars and locks on all your doors and windows. Yeah, you're safe, but you can never leave your house. So it's not very useful. There's always going to be some level of acceptable risk. And that's what a risk framework is going to help you frame that against, to see what is that acceptable risk. Let's talk a little bit about the challenges and the role of AI when we marry it to cybersecurity. Small businesses and mid-market organizations really consider this marriage of cyber attacks as a business risk over a 50%. But that number should be much higher, right? Cyber attacks are a business risk, again, to every organization. When I talk to our customers in large enterprises and in global organizations, this number is much higher. One could argue from an organizational standpoint, they have a lot more at stake. But I would argue on your behalf that leading your organization to your stakeholders equally is important. And so the considerations that we give to cybersecurity as a risk are vital. When we look at things like viruses, malware, phishing as a major risk, we just talked about how the human factor continues to be, for any size organization, the number one threat vector. Yet less than half of organizations feel that phishing, which is specifically targeted to that human factor, is a risk. When we look at challenges increasing 1.2x or 1x for the mid-market year over year, these are significant factors. So we see there's a disconnect here. There's an imbalance in terms of our readiness and the environment in which that we're operating in as organizations. And a lot of times I get the question of, oh, I'm a small business, I have 50 employees, I have 150 employees. I'm not so attractive, right? I mean, it's much more attractive for the attacker to go after the big bank or the healthcare company because they have a lot more information. It's a much bigger bank. And I'll flip it around to you like this. There's a couple of ways to look at this. The first is, if I'm a bank robber, I'm going to put on a mask and I'm going to go rob a bank. I can choose to go after the big, shiny bank that's got billions of dollars sitting inside of its vault, or I can go after the small bank that's got 3 people inside and it doesn't have billions of dollars inside. Maybe it has a couple $100,000 inside, but it's got a part-time security guard and the back door is sometimes unlocked and they don't really know where they keep the key for the back door. Which is going to be the more attractive target for me? And keeping with that same metaphor, as a bank robber going into a bank, my risk, right, doing theft in the physical world is much higher from a risk standpoint for criminal organizations. Whereas in the virtual world, in the digital world, I can attack 100 organizations at the same time. I can attack thousands of organizations at the same time. And I don't need to be successful in every single one of those attacks. All I need is one good hit. And so with that in mind, what can small organizations do or smaller organizations, mid-market organizations do to bolster their cybersecurity posture? The first is the same thing that large organizations do. Have a proactive approach to cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not a bolt-on to our business. Inside of a large organization, cybersecurity is part of the operations. It's part of the business processes. It's there in everything that business does inside of what they're doing from an operational standpoint. Inside of those considerations, we need a new platform for customer relationship management. Cybersecurity is going to be in there from day one as part of those considerations. And that should be the same case whether your organization has 100,000 employees or 100 employees. Automate what you can. We talked about AI. AI has provided some tremendous capabilities when it comes to cybersecurity, especially when it comes to automation. We at Lenovo, for example, have a tool, and we'll talk about it in just a moment, where we can automate detection and remediation, freeing up the expensive human resource capital and having them focus on the things that are more important. We have a tool that automates a lot of these processes. We have managed services. Look for those cost-effective solutions. There's a lot of shiny objects in the world, not just in the world of cybersecurity, but in the world of all tech. Find the solutions and the best solutions that meet the needs of what you're trying to solve for. And then it's comprehensive protection. And comprehensive protection is not just about we have an antivirus deployed, for example, or we have some level of email security. It's about the fact that, one, we have visibility into our environment. So we know what digital assets and what hardware assets we have, because you cannot secure what you can't see. So if you don't know how many PCs, for example, are inside your organization, it's going to become very, very difficult for you to secure that organization. So gaining visibility, having control over those devices, having the ability to detect and remediate not just known attacks, but unknown attacks, what we call in cybersecurity zero-day attacks. These are brand new, never before seen attacks in the wild. Having an ability to detect and prevent and roll back from ransomware attacks. This starts to form the basis of a comprehensive security posture. So let's talk about one of our customers, a small mid-sized organization that was looking to solve a challenge when it came to its data. Because again, data is the new oil. So the challenge was this particular customer was dealing with highly sensitive data based on the segment or the sector that they were in. They wanted an EDR. And let me just say EDR is kind of a fancy way of saying antivirus. It stands for Extended Detection and Remediation. What that means is in your traditional antivirus, it would look against a signature, and each file has a signature on it that say, okay, this file is legitimate, this file is malicious. I've seen this signature on this malicious file before. I'm not going to allow it to enter my organization. I'm not going to allow it to run. And there were absolutely ways to circumvent this. These new capabilities, and what we have, for example, in our ThinkShield portfolio, we have a solution called ThinkShield XDR, which stands for Extended Detection and Response, powered by SentinelOne, not only provides that signature level protection, but it takes it multiple steps forward. It uses true artificial intelligence to string together disparate pieces of data that have either been seen before or maybe have never been seen before, and create in the back end a contextual story for the machine learning to be able to detect what is malicious or nefarious and what is legitimate. This is a leap forward technologically because we're using AI to not just automate the protection process, but to automate at scale the detection process, to be able to leverage the power of language models to identify what is good and what is bad. And so as a result of this organization rolling this out, not only were they able to get, as I would call it, a single throat to choke or a single provider for their full coverage, but they also didn't need to worry about navigating multiple agreements, delivery plans, service models. They were also able to use Lenovo as kind of that one-stop shop because at Lenovo, we take a very security by design approach to everything that we do, including when it comes to our hardware devices. When we are building and ideating and moving through our R&D process, a new device, security is there. Remember I said earlier, security needs to be built into the processes. Security is there every step of the way to say, hey, we need to build this. These are the capabilities we need to build in what we call below the OS or below the operating system into the platform. We need to have things like self-healing BIOS, which our devices do. We need to have firmware resiliency, which our devices do. Being able to protect those critical components and those critical workflows below the operating systems where the OS has no visibility and most security tools don't have visibility. Those are the types of capabilities we build into that device to be able to provide that comprehensive stack. And then we layer on top of it a solution like ThinkShield XDR, powered by SentinelOne, to give that holistic protection for an organization in this size, in this scope. One of the things that we're really proud of is the comprehensive portfolio that we have for small and medium enterprises and organizations, providing comprehensive protection, affordable packages, priced right, delivered right for organizations at speed, at scale. And then, of course, leveraging a deep network of trusted expert partnerships that we've built up over the years, whether it's those partnerships with the likes of companies like Microsoft and Intel and all the chip makers to market leaders like SentinelOne when it comes to EDR and XDR technology, or Sepio when it comes to technologies around locking down the actual hardware platform. Let's finish up by talking about 5 core things as we start to build our frameworks for our own individual organizations. One is safeguard the assets. Gain visibility into what you have and where you have. And again, within the ThinkShield portfolio, we have a solution for this as part of our SMB or what we call our Pro bundle that gives visibility. Ensure end-to-end protection, right? We talked about below OS. Well, at Lenovo, we go even further when we have capabilities for supply chain security that can help you validate and attest to all those critical components that are actually in the device. Then you have the below OS security capabilities, just some of which I spoke about, and then a portfolio of solutions above OS. This helps drive boost efficiency and leverage AI for good to help drive that boost efficiency through some of the security tools that we have. And then drive compliance. We can't forget about the compliance aspect when we talk about security and privacy. There's a lot to consider here, but it's a solvable challenge that we've always got to keep pushing forward on, regardless of the size of organization that we are, whether we're a large organization or a small organization. I thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to being back with you again in the future.